our next panel. We're very excited to uplift this panel. And again, when we talk about our iHeal work, we understand that, communities don't face these issues in silos. And we also know that the issues of the iHeal platform intersect with one another. When residents are facing these issues. So this next panel showcases an example of what the power of the iHeal platform looks like and what working across issue areas can look like as well. We also know that our solutions need to reflect the reality. So please allow us to welcome the Housing and Land Use Planning Subcommittees as they present on affordable housing and compact growth. I would like to note that we will have a Assembly Member Joaquin Arambula joining us for this session at 11:30. And so he'll be back in this session as well. But I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to our Housing and Land Use and Planning Subcommittee to take it over. Subcommittees as we present on affordable housing and compact growth. I would like to note that we will have a you're on, guys.
Okay, I hear a lagging, and so I wanted to make sure I wasn't interrupting anything.
I think one of you has an extra tab open in the background, so if you just want to close your extra tab, you'll be good.
Awesome, thank you all. Take it away, Alexandra.
Thank you so much, Sergio. Appreciate you. Hi, everyone. Welcome, everyone, to the Housing and Land Use Subcommittee's event for the 2022 Equity on the Mall. My name is Alexandra Alvarado. I am a community organizer with Faith in the Valley and your MC for this portion. We're so excited for all of you to join us today. A little bit about me. I was born and raised in the Central Valley of Dinuba, California. I've been working towards working alongside many across the Central Valley who believe housing is a human right and believe that when we put people over profit, then we can get to a place where everyone can thrive. So we're excited to have all of you join us today for a robust discussion on how affordable housing has an impact on the San Joaquin Valley communities and the value in bringing constituent voices to the table. Among our presenters today will be Betsy McGovern Garcia, Program Director of Real Estate Development at Self-Help Enterprise based in Visalia. We also have Dr. Joaquin Arambula, representing the 31st District in the California Assembly, and our special guests, Nick Worrell and Christine Worrell of Residents United Network, to speak about how affordable housing has impacted their lives. To kick us off, we are excited to have our favorite affordable housing developer join us. From Self-Help Enterprise, we have Betsy McGovern Garcia, Program Director of Real Estate Development. Ms. McGovern Garcia has over 18 years of experience in affordable housing development, including extensive project management experience, tax credit syndication, sustainability projects, including solar, PV, and gray water, grant writing, and financial underwriting, and construction design and management. While with the city of Tulare from 2006 to 2012, Betsy obtained her LEEDAP certification.
I don't know how to refresh my website.
Facilitated various energy efficiency projects and coordinated the cleanup of 3 brownfield sites with EPA funding. Betsy also facilitated the development of over 600 units of affordable housing with the city as a lender in various projects. Betsy worked for the City of Visalia Natural Resource Conservation Division from 2012 to 2014 and assisted with the design of water conservation policy and community engagement plan. Installation of 1.78 megawatts of solar PV and extensive energy efficient improvements at 3 city facilities. Since rejoining Self-Help Enterprise team in 2014, the organization has been successful in constructing 424 new affordable housing units, secured funding, and has an additional 600 units in construction and completed the acquisition of sustainable rehabilitation of 299 existing units. The real estate development team has been successful in leveraging low-income housing tax credits with state and federal resources, such as
you need to get in now.
Affordable housing and sustainable communities. Under Betsy's leadership, Under Betsy's leadership, housing projects have expanded to include a variety of sustainability elements, including zero net energy development, gray water and variety transportation amenities, including van pool, ride sharing, and public transit initiative programs. Betsy also oversees the construction of subdivisions to provide finished lots for the Mutual Self-Help Housing Program. Under her direction, she has developed over 400 new single-unit lots and secured secondary financing such as Home, SHOP, USDA, California Self-Help Housing Program funds, and other single-family financing resources. Currently, Real Estate Development Team, has 1,369 rental units in various stages of pre-development and 402 single-family lots in development. That was quite a mouthful, Betsy, so we are so excited to have you with us. Please, over to you, Betsy.
Okay, well, thank you. Is the group able to share my screen? Do you see my PowerPoint?
We do see it up.
Okay, perfect. Well, good morning, everyone. As was mentioned, my name is Betsy McGovern Garcia, Director of Real Estate Development at Self-Help Enterprises. I have made a mental note to myself to start sending my 2-line bio so that all of the great attendees in the audience never have to sit through that again. So my apologies for that extensive listing. Just a bit about Self-Help Enterprises. We are based in Visalia with an office in Madera. We were established in 1965, and we did pioneer the mutual self-help housing model where families contribute 40 hours of labor a week to build their own homes, typically building in groups of 10 to 12 families, and none of the families move in until all of the families in the group have completed their home and it's ready for move-in. We do own and operate just under 2,000 units of rental housing. As was mentioned, we currently have 600 units under construction and approximately 1,300 in pre-development. We have an active community services division that works on the drought and water and sewer and drinking water and schools and making sure that every resident of the San Joaquin Valley has access to clean drinking water and adequate infrastructure. That includes an emergency response team that delivers water and puts in new water wells and installs laterals, and also has been active in wildfire response and the pandemic. We have actively participated in California's climate funding programs, the Affordable Housing and Sustainable Communities Program. We have 5 of those projects, which I'll talk about today, and 1 transformative climate communities project in Fresno. And we are implementing a whole variety of transportation and sustainability efforts. And really the fundamental focus of our work is healthy communities, healthy and sustainable communities. How do we help our residents be healthy and thrive? How do we support communities and keep them vital and sustainable for the long term? So I'm just going to share some case studies, the first of which is Stonegate Village in Patterson. It was actually a hybrid, which probably won't mean much to folks who are not low-income housing tax credit practitioners, but we did use a combination of 4% and 9% tax credits. It is located within a larger subdivision, so at full build-out, we'll have 138 rental units and 207 single-family homes. It is the inclusionary component of a larger development project, which contains approximately 2,500 housing units. And so I'm pleased to say the city of Patterson is one of the only communities in the San Joaquin Valley with an inclusionary housing program. And our project is a direct result of that great policy. We did, in response to the Affordable Housing and Sustainable Communities Program, increase our density. So part of, preserving open spaces and ag land is really being good stewards of infill sites and of sites designated for rental housing development. So we are building at 20 units per acre and actively working with an architect called Worrell Architects out of Sacramento. We also worked on this project to expand van pool into Stanislaus County. The California Van Pool Authority has a joint powers agreement, which allows it to provide van pool throughout the San Joaquin Valley, and Stanislaus County was not a member of that JPA. So through this project, which included a new bus pullout, sidewalks, bike lanes, we were also able to facilitate the entry of Stanislaus County into the JPA. We do develop pretty much 100% of our new projects as zero net energy. We include solar PV to offset the common area loads and the residential loads. So in this case, the local utility provider, it wasn't one of the large IOUs, did not have a program for virtual net energy metering. So through Stonegate Village, we were able to work with the utility provider to pilot a virtual net energy program. One thing that's really fascinating about Patterson and really the northern San Joaquin County is the proximity to the Bay Area. Patterson itself is only a 30-minute BART ride from, or 30-minute drive from the BART. So people can move out and sprawl out into the San Joaquin Valley and take BART to get into the city, or take a quick 90-minute car ride into the city. And so we're seeing a lot of our local residents struggling with the rents, struggling with the housing shortage. We're seeing, 3 generations of farm worker families that are being displaced from places like Patterson and the surrounding communities. And it's really creating a lot of problems for the working families that we support. As I mentioned, Stonegate Village was part of a large master planned community. Love these aerial photos of our projects because you can see the roof line covered in solar. You can see that we're building single family housing next to multifamily housing, which creates housing choice and opportunity. All of our projects include a roughly 3,000 square foot community center. And within that community center, we're able to offer financial literacy, ESL, Zumba to keep people moving. And it really creates housing opportunity in that someone can live in the rental community with an affordable rent. They can save for a down payment, and eventually they can move up and out into our single family program and build their own home. So here's an example of a balanced community where we have higher density housing next to single family housing next to a school. I mentioned some of the sustainability features in Stonegate Village. Just a few things to expand on. We did install 6 fast electric vehicle chargers. You see them pictured here. We installed a bus pullout for a bus stop. We're actually providing free transit passes to all of our residents and vouchers to participate in van pool. So part of creating healthy communities and equity and access is ensuring that our residents also have access to good, high quality transportation opportunities, whether it's van pool, to a common place of employment, accessing the bus, or using our electric vehicle car sharing program, which is called MioCar. These are all expanded transportation opportunities that we're pairing with high quality, affordable housing to ensure that our residents have opportunity. Another project I wanted to share is Palm Terrace in Lindsay. The first phase of Palm Terrace was actually funded through the second round of Affordable Housing and Sustainable Communities, and really pivotal for that program because we applied the first round and failed miserably. Literally, we finished in last position or last place on the competition. And the project is higher density, the highest density that's been built in the city of Lindsay. It has workforce connections, on-site services, van pool, construction of a new roundabout, all kinds of great things. And it's going to finish in last place. And that is representative of early AHSC rounds, which did not include the Rural Innovation Project area set aside. And really, this project created the foundation to advocate for a rural set aside within the cap and trade funded programs. This project's also exciting. We have gray water for landscaping, a variety of water conservation measures, solar PV, And then I mentioned MeoCar. We have 2 electric vehicles on site that the residents can reserve and take for trips to Valley Children's Hospital or other places. And it eliminates the need for a second vehicle, in some instances, all vehicles, and really creates a great transportation opportunity. One other thing I want to mention is that as we're going all electric and putting on solar PV, we're looking at our community centers, our community buildings, as a cooling center and also as an emergency response center. So there's tremendous opportunity within our rental housing communities for the broader community to use those spaces in an emergency or for just general community gatherings, informational meetings, community meetings, things of that nature. So we're trying to educate about these spaces and remind communities that they're available in these different instances for use by the broader community. So 2 really great attributes of Palm Terrace and Lindsay. We were able to secure about $1.2 million through AHSC to construct a roundabout. So this was a 4-lane road that went down to 2, dramatically slowed down traffic, dramatically decreased the amount of the asphalt that needed to be crossed by the students crossing over to the school, and really improved the safety and walkability and bikeability of the area. The second attribute of Palm Terrace that we just really promotes water conservation is the EPIC gray water recycling system. So this is actually a passive system where the water percolates up and irrigates the grass that is located around the playground. And it's a great way to reuse water on our site. Just wanted to take a minute and talk about single family infill development. You know, we really do at Self-Help Enterprises still strongly promote home ownership as one of the remaining tools to break the cycle of poverty and create wealth within families. And so in addition to our mutual self-help housing program, we also have an infill new construction program. I will say that it is not easy. It's one of the most difficult programs we run. And cities haven't quite stepped up to the table yet to streamline infill permitting and provide the incentives that are really required to make it work. But we are taking a run at it. In Visalia, we have 5 lots in North Visalia. We've got 6 in Hanford and 6 in Southwest Fresno. The bottom picture here is a picture of a property on College Avenue in Fresno that we redeveloped with the former redevelopment agency and are making that available to a first-time homeowner. Really, in order to promote infill development of this nature, we need streamlined processing through the cities. We can't have our plan check sit for 6 months and spend, huge amount of resources on engineering calculations and studies and things of that nature. We need flexibility with development concessions. Fresno has granted a concession for us to leave the overhead lines existing and just do some creative things to make these infill sites feasible. And all of these projects require secondary financing for affordability. You know, they will cost somewhere between $250,000 and $300,000 to construct. And our low-income families can usually afford a mortgage between $150,000 and $180,000. So we layer that with secondary financing to make these projects feasible. One other project I wanted to mention is our Goshen development. We were actually found in the community of Goshen, which is just outside of Visalia on the 99, with our first group of 3 families in 1965. But we have systematically developed essentially 2 40-acre parcels in Goshen. And I think this is really a great example of the evolution in density and land use, and also the ability to create balanced communities where our residents can walk and bike to the things that they need. In Goshen, we developed a 10-acre park next to a family health care network clinic. And so we have a health clinic and a park. In the second phase, we have already constructed Sequoia Commons 1 and 2, which is 100 and 28 units of rental housing, including approximately 30 units of permanent supportive housing. We sold the property that's labeled Phase 5 on the corner for a grocery store, also acknowledging that Goshen is a food desert and we cannot support healthy families without having access to clean or to healthy food options, fruits, vegetables, etc. And so we did deed restrict that corner for the development of a grocery store. The upper right-hand star is the installation of a traffic signal that will help support safe circulation in the area. The entire project is surrounded by a Class 1 separated bike lane and sidewalks. And we are in the process of developing the neighborhood village, which is a manufactured housing community that will serve as 100% permanent supportive housing in partnership with our friends and partners at Salt and Light Works in Visalia, another nonprofit. So we've got a real balance of uses with commercial, parks, health clinics. We've got 89 single family homes in this phase, rental housing, and then permanent supportive housing. And here's just a sampling of the housing types. You can see our 20 unit per acre apartments on the right of the screen with the solar and the open space, which actually serves as a water recharge basin. And then the manufactured housing units on the left that we'll be doing in Neighborhood Village. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and stop my screen share and send it back to the moderator and potentially open it up for questions.
Thank you so much, Betsy. I appreciate your work and care for the Central Valley and all the work that you all have been putting in, especially in the rural parts of the Central Valley. I think we're going to take questions at the end. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce our next speaker. Dr. Joaquin Arambola was first elected in 2016 to represent the 31st Assembly District in the Central Valley. He is the first Latino physician elected to the California State Assembly. He proudly represents a district that includes 41% of the city of Fresno, as well as the rural cities and communities in Fresno County. Arambola's experiences as an emergency room doctor in Selma in the Fresno County forged his determination to improve health care for all people, especially the most vulnerable. He saw the emotional and financial hardships of people struggling with illness that could have been prevented with access to quality health care. Arambola believes health care is a fundamental human right. Since his election, he has been a forceful advocate in addressing the dire shortage of doctors and other healthcare professionals in the Central Valley. He has authored legislation that improves health and mental health services, but he has also been vigilant to include measures that ensure transparency regarding management of these services and their cost. In addition, Arambola is fighting to bring more water to the Central Valley by calling for the construction of the Temperance Flat Dam Reservoir and championing legislation for groundwater recharge projects.
Alexandra, I'm gonna pause there. So we just got word Joaquin Arambola is going to be joining us at 11:30. So we can move into our next presenter to start that work, and then when Assembly Arambola joins us, we can come back in to get his pieces in this. So we can go ahead and just move on to the next presentation. That'd be great. And then again, we may have to pause again to fit in the time for Assembly Arambola when he comes in at 11:30.
Okay, that sounds great.
No problem. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. So I think I have next on the speaker list, Nick and Christine. I just want to make sure that's right. Yeah. So Nick and Christine are powerful community leaders who dedicate their lives, their time, and their heart to working to advocate for the unhoused in Stockton, California. They have both played instrumental roles in multiple actions to address the housing justice crisis affecting the whole state of California. Currently, they are representing the Central Valley in a national campaign for a homes guarantee. And they are also today here representing as a part of RUN, Residents United Network, which was founded in 2014. They are community change builders. They build power among residents and staff of affordable housing to change laws that have every Californian, that make sure that every Californian has a safe, stable, and affordable home. So thank you, Christine and Nick, for being here. I'll pass it over to you all.
Thank you for having us. It's great to be here to be able to share our story. For me, it's started back in 2018, getting out of prison on Valentine's Day, into homelessness. And you know, you don't realize the struggle of how hard it is to live on the streets versus having a home. Just the expense behind it, the stability behind it, the mental health, security, I guess you could call it, behind it is, you know, there's a lacking in it. And when you're coming out of prison, you want to be able to have that stability of housing. And when you don't, it makes me see the reason that we have the revolving door in our prison system. You know, a lot of people from, I believe in California, the numbers are 70% of the homeless in California are ex-felons or felons. And that's a problem. That's a big number. And, you know, the revolving door is just going to continue being there if we don't have support for those like us. Living on the streets is not fun. It's not safe. It's not okay. We need more support. We need housing. For me, housing is a human right. It is not a privilege, nor will it ever be a privilege. It is a human right. Without housing and stability, you don't have anything. You don't even have mental support. It's so hard to go through the day-to-days on the streets when you're living in a tent and you have to worry about your safety and security from others, as well as your safety and security from the police force on the street. They come out, they have you, tell you you can't be there, tell you to leave, and then not have any information of where to go. The shelters don't work. That's a broken system that needs to be fixed, unless you like thinking you're in prison, because living in the shelters is just that. It's just like living in a prison. Your neighbor is literally right next to you. You reach out your hand, you could smack him in the face. And you know, nobody wants to live that close to somebody. But the struggle through that of 3 to 4 years of living on the streets, trying to make sure my wife was taken care of, my pets were taken care of. I met my wife on the street 2 years after being homeless. We got married, and through that we've grown in every way. We came into housing finally in February, and it's just a blessing. It's so much easier, so much cheaper. Being able to pay one bill, you know, bills in a monthly succession versus having to figure out where you're going to get your funds to pay for gas for a generator so you can have electricity. Or if you're living in your vehicle, pay for gas in your vehicle to move around, as well as have air conditioning and heating, so in the summer or the winter you're not freezing or hot. It's so much of a struggle. And now that I'm in housing and being able to do more and fight more for these folks that are unsheltered and need some support and some help and some advancement, instead of getting beat down and continually berated and just talked down to and disrespected, and you know, that needs to stop. And until that stops, it's going to continue to be a thing until our government steps up and does what they feel that they need to do, not that they feel that they need to do, and make that change. and get some housing out here for everyone, and do away with the systems that they have. The background checks, that needs to go. That makes it impossible for anybody to get in. And it took me 4 years with my background just to finally get into a place, and that is crazy. So that's another reason why AB 1816 for me, with this organization run that we're working with now, is so important to me, because if this bill can pass and get into process, it will allow housing for people coming out of prison, as well as housing for those that are on the streets with felony backgrounds or been in prison. And it'll give them that stability. The programs that are out there now don't work. 6 months is not enough time. 6 months is not enough time to get somebody into housing. It's just a Band-Aid to try to fix the problem. And until you get permanent housing for folks like me with a felony background, this is how the system's going to be. You're going to live on the streets. You're going to end up back in prison. And it's just going to be a continued revolving door that needs to be stopped. So AB 1816 supplies housing as well as, excuse me, as well as job training and skills so that you can get into housing. And it will also, you will be in the program till you are housed. They will help you get into your own housing. So that's why this needs to be done. This needs to be passed. And what's I got a couple, so I'm most excited about with all of this is being the change maker, being a part of the change makers. And without people like us to be able to speak your mind and say what you need to say and tell people, they don't know. They're just going to stick to what the government says homelessness is and what the people out there are about, versus knowing the truth and going out there and finding out. Unless you've been homeless, you can't speak on the homeless. You don't know. Going out there does not fix it. Going out there does not make you a knower. Living it, knowing it, feeling it, going through the experience of everything, that's knowing what homelessness is. And until you've done that, I don't feel you can speak. 10,000 hours it takes to be a professional at something. Who more to be a professional at knowing what the homeless need, what the homeless are about, than the ones living it on the streets day to day, 24/7. That's more than 10,000 hours. So I will go ahead and let my wife speak for a minute. I apologize for taking everybody's time. Thank you for listening.
Hi, I'm Christine Worrell. It took me a second to figure out how I want to start the story, but I became homeless out of 20 years of emotional and mental and physical abuse from my ex-husband. I decided to start in a new city. I was living in Sacramento, came out to Stockton, where I had a friend at the time, but I ended up going into the shelters. I had my service dog with me. They would not let me in with her, so I had to find a temporary home for a few months. But it got to a point where I didn't have no help in the shelters. I ended up being homeless. I met my husband, who's given me my greatest stability. When I was in the shelter, they would not let me see him when I was going through my mental breakdowns. So shelters, there's a lot of barriers to it. And it's all right for a temporary setting, but it's definitely not a means to ending the homeless situation. When I teamed up with Run and heard the bills that they had going on, I was excited. I'm like, yes, we're finally getting ready to do something on a state level. through 1816, I can share in my husband's struggles to find housing. So I was right there with him. Through the housing, through the 4 years of being unhoused, and the struggles with water, the struggles with, I got my SSI, but it wasn't enough. I know others that are struggling right now. They've got Section 8 vouchers. They've got Central Valley housing vouchers. But they're having troubles finding housing. And so, 1816's become a real big focus for me. But with that, I'm going to hand it over to Alexandra. It looks like our assembly member is here. So let's hear from him.
Thank you so much, Christine and Nick. I can't tell you enough how much and I know others that are on deeply appreciate your story, your honesty, your time. I know y'all are working on so much. If y'all are in the chat, make sure y'all are giving so much love to Nick and Christine, having to share all that, having to remember all the different parts of barriers and challenges that come along with acquiring safe housing, which is a human right. It's just too much. So thank you deeply. Show them some love, y'all. Next up, I am gonna introduce Assemblymember Arambula. Dr. Joaquin Arambula was first elected in 2016 to represent the 31st District Assembly District in the Central Valley. He is the first Latino physician elected to the California State Assembly. Arambula's experience as an emergency room doctor in Selma and Fresno County forged his determination to improve healthcare for all people, especially the most vulnerable. He saw the emotional and financial hardships of people struggling with illness that could have been prevented with access to quality healthcare. Arambula believes healthcare is a fundamental human right. Arambula is fighting to bring more water to the Central Valley by calling construction of the Temperance Flat Dam and Reservoir and championing legislation for groundwater recharge projects. He has also worked diligently for improvements in other areas, including public safety, job development, and support for veterans and service members. As a 31st District Assembly member, Arambula successfully obtained millions of dollars to benefit communities in his district. Those efforts include securing $70 million for transformative climate communities to invest in disadvantaged communities, $18 million for state route in Huron, $10.5 to improve public safety in the cities of Selma, Huron, Fireball, and Mendota, and $6 million for the Cow Food Program to assist local food banks in combating hunger, among other projects. Arambula was born in Delano, the heart of the farm worker movement, grew up in Fresno where he attended public schools and is a graduate of Bowdoin College in Maine and the University of Minnesota Medical School. His parents are Juan and Amy Arambula. They both instilled in their children a commitment to hard work, purpose, and public service. Dr. Joaquin Arambula and his wife Elizabeth live in Fresno with their 3 daughters. Dr. Arambula, thank you so much for joining us, and I will turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Alexandra. And if I can, I just want to start by appreciating Nick and Christine and their testimony right before this. I think it's important for us to hear firsthand experiences and stories to make sure that your representatives are representing you. And so I'm grateful for the opportunity to be here in a space to be able to receive that information, much like I had heard from my community when I served as an emergency room doctor. And so while there are a number of issues that that are central to my district and to all of you, I really want to talk a little bit about where I'm from in Fresno, if I can. For those of you who know Fresno, Fresno has really been a tale of 2 cities. One in which those that I represent who have been historically underinvested in and who live in the heart of our city have been left in decline for far too long. But we are turning that around in Fresno. On both a state and local level, we are making strategic investments and helping to pass transformative legislation. We heard about some of that earlier during the introduction, as was referenced during transformative climate communities, and would point towards the diligent work being done by community members to advocate for affordable housing in our urban center, to work on urban greening and permaculture, to add a new community college as examples of way in which we can lean into our advocacy and help to return and bring back more resources. I would also point to the immense opportunity that presents itself with high-speed rail for our communities, to make sure that we are being intentional and to recognize the economic drivers that will come when we are investing into infrastructure and building tomorrow today. I'm excited for us as a valley to see what those investments will do, but know that we must learn from those who have made critical infrastructure investments before and make sure that we are investing into our housing supply, which is so necessary. I am proud to say, as Nick and Christine were both asking earlier, that I did vote for AB 1816, as I believe it's important for all members of our community to make sure that we have access to housing. I'd like to talk to, if I can, about the need for us to address the continued sprawl that occurs in too many of our communities. It's important for us to make use of either long vacant or underused spaces, and would point to, within the governor's budget, $600 million that we're looking to help to repurpose commercial building or other reuse projects. I'd also point to $225 million that we are looking for infrastructure grant program that would help us to make sure that projects would pencil out and that we could build projects into our core communities. But while we are doing and working on housing and urban revitalization, if I can, it's also about loving and caring the land that we live on. And I will talk and elevate, if I can, a passion project of mine for the last couple of years and working on AB 559, which was signed into law last year, as well as securing funding for gaining access to the San Joaquin River. We have the second longest river here in California in the Central Valley, and it's a real jewel. And for too many of our community members, we don't have access to that river and the amenities that it provides. The passage of our law will allow more diverse voices, will encourage more access with the use of those O&M funds. And I'm excited for how parks and housing can directly impact the health of our communities. So we must ensure that access to healthcare is also ingrained in the communities that we serve. I will point to the work we've done with Health for All and the movement and efforts of so many who are also participating in today's call by making sure that we end the unjust exclusion of our immigrant communities from being able to access healthcare. We can address equity at its core and make sure that we are learning lessons from this pandemic of the century. I'm excited to continue to advocate for AB 4 as well as AB 2680, which will help to bring community health navigators, the trusted messengers from our CBOs and nonprofits out into community to make sure that we can enroll and encourage people to retain Medi-Cal or to enroll for the first time. It is through these strategic investments and policies that we can build communities which are made for all Californians. I'm grateful to be invited to speak and to listen and to hear from my community as well. It's an honor and privilege to represent the Central Valley, and I'm grateful to be here in this space, working with all of you in solidarity. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Odambala, for being here today, for your time, and for sharing about your work. It is deeply appreciated. Thank you for representing the Central Valley with so much care. I appreciate you. There are some questions in the chat. And I think they're directed at different folks. So I think we'll bring folks up to the stage, and I think they're for all the panelists. So question 1, if you could pick one hurdle to creating affordable housing in California, what would that be?
Well,
go ahead, please.
Go ahead, Assemblyman.
No, I look, I always want to make sure we're getting our fair share of resources. In the San Joaquin Valley, we always feel that the coast, the urban centers get the lion's share of the dollars, and believe that our communities deserve access to housing funding just as much as they do. And it really requires us to stand together and to advocate for our fair share of funding. And so I'd love to be able to remove that hurdle if possible and make sure that we get an equitable amount of funding, but know that we have much more work to do before that's a reality.
Yeah, and I certainly echo that comment. We spend most of our life at self-help enterprises trying to access resources to develop housing and improve communities. And I would just expand on that by saying we also need continued support and advocacy from our local government partners. I think the state of California has come a long way in promoting by right development, streamlining CEQA approvals for home key projects and creating some of those resources. But specifically, infill development is so challenging. There's issues with old easements, there's infrastructure challenges, all of those things. And there is still a strong, not in my backyard, NIMBY community in the San Joaquin Valley. And so to the extent that we can work together, that we can use our housing elements and our local policy, and also, work with our partners like Christine and Nick to bring forward the support for these projects and really work to streamline permitting, create community support, and all those things, I think is really imperative.
And I'm going to speak on you guys asked the question of the hurdle for affordable housing in California. What would that be? My honest opinion, the biggest hurdle is our government. I get the concept of building affordable housing. It makes a lot of sense. And if it were faster, it would help. My problem is I believe that if we started some sort of tiny home project and used the tiny home project to transition into those affordable housings, that would at least give folks, especially the unsheltered, a place to be for stability, to go to work and not have to worry about their property being destroyed or stolen. And they can start becoming pillars of our community and coming up in life and stop that revolving door with our prison system. And I'm just curious of how easy it would be to start that. And then, because it's going to take 6 months to build a tiny home project with 100 or more tiny homes. And it takes months and years to build affordable housing. So why not go the easy route and fix the problem now and do the long route after that's done? Continue what we're doing, but get something that can fix the problem now and transition them into the affordable housing so that they know that they're going to be able to stay in that affordable housing versus, oh, good, we got a place. And then 6 months later, a landlord saying, well, we're going to remodel the place, so everybody's got to get out. It's, if they can't evict one person, they go for the let's evict all. And I think that's another barrier that needs to be broken as well. But that's my opinion on that.
My opinion on stuff that would be fixable is doing something with those credit checks and not having so high application fees and stuff like that, because especially when working with the homeless, they don't have much money to be constantly, transportation going to all of these different places. They don't have, you know, a lot of the money to be constantly putting in for credit check application fees and all of that. And, you know, background checks and all that do stop them from being able to get into places. And being able to direct them, not just giving them the vouchers, but being able to direct them to the housing that the vouchers would apply to. Because most of them, they have their vouchers, but they don't know where to begin to look for housing. Or they don't get the housing within the short amount of time that the vouchers allow. And then they lose it, and they're still stuck right where they're at. So that's what I would say would be one thing to be able to really enlighten and resolve some of the issues.
I'm going to need to jump, but did want to follow up on Nick's comment if I can. I don't believe it needs to be either or. I think it can be and we should be doing both. I will say in Fresno, that's what we're trying to do. We are both working on a tiny home project and working on affordable housing. And so appreciate the perspective and think it's very important for us to have that broad portfolio to make sure we're having low barriers for access. We heard from Christine earlier about the need for us to make sure that it's pet accessible. And those tiny homes really are a great way for us to make sure that we have that availability. And again, just sorry I'm in and out, but do appreciate the space and time to be here with you all today. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much, Assembly Member. Thank you for being here. We have time for at least maybe like a few more questions. Do you all, there's a current rent control model that we have in the Central Valley. Do you all think the rent control model, or like how we use or how we see rent control happening, do we think that's attainable in the Central Valley? Do you all think it's working in the Central Valley?
I believe it's attainable. I just don't. Look, I'll be real. For me, it all relies on our government. I'm a firm believer that, you know, they want to keep raising minimum wage to try to combat the issues people are having with paying their bills, their rent. They want to try to make it easier to take that, you know, but when you're raising that and then you're coinciding by raising the cost of living, so food, water, gas, electricity, you're constant. So the money that we end up getting never helps. It just continues because the cost of living goes with it. So unless they put a cap on cost of living throughout the U.S., and they probably have to do other countries because we do buy a lot of our stuff from overseas. And unless they put a cap on these things, these raises that they keep giving us from minimum wage are useless and very much pointless. So it's more of a battle of keep the rich rich and keep the poor poor. And until you cap something, it's never going to change. So until you cap the amount of rent that you expect people to pay for housing, you're just going to keep playing this back and forth game. And I don't think that's viable for anybody in the United States. I don't think that's viable for anybody in the world. And our government is going to continue being in debt until they stop doing the things that they're continually doing that keep putting us in debt. And this is one of them. You know, it's a joke when they say, oh, we're going to raise the minimum wage. It's a joke because you already know once they raise that minimum wage, a couple weeks from then, they're going to be raising the cost of living right behind it. So then you're just back to living paycheck to paycheck. And that's not affordable for anybody. And that's the other thing with the affordable housing. Who's it really affordable for? Because I know it's not affordable for the low and no income. It's affordable for the middle to high income. And even for middle class, it's not even really viable for them. And you know, if we want housing for all, then things got to change. And I mean drastically, not Band-Aids. I mean like going in and doing some surgery and removing what don't work and adding in what does. Put the stitches on the wounds. We got to fix it, because this is just what's working. What's here going on isn't working.
I think just to expand on some of Nick's comments, you know, I agree. There's a lot of things that are broken and challenging, which is the reason why it takes us, you know, 3 to 5 years to deliver a project that should be done in 18 months. And, you know, we talked a little bit about tiny homes. Our neighborhood village project in Goshen is manufactured housing. We can get the foundations built and get the units on site and installed in 6 months instead of, you know, 14 months that a traditional stick built project would take. And so we are starting to look at alternate building products and stuff that's manufactured offsite. We cannot continue to build the same way that we have been. We've got to embrace innovation in these different housing product types. And Nick, to your point, you know, if we have a 60% area median income unit, our rents are around $1,000. And that's, you know, to someone who is unhoused or at risk of homelessness or any of those things, that's not attainable. And so, you know, one program that we really thought was effective was the No Place Like Home program. It got to what Christine was talking about, where there's no, you know, minimum credit checks. You can have debt, you know, it's housing first, low barrier housing that's really accessible to everyone. You can come into the project with zero income, and they have what's called a capitalized operating subsidy reserve to help with the operation. So all of those things are absolutely vital. You know, we continue to hear about the overreach of state government and individual property owner rights. And I think those are the two inherent things in the San Joaquin Valley that are really going to challenge rent control and any kind of meaningful either rent control policies or inclusionary housing. Is just that, you know, that perception and that opinion of overstep. And certainly at the end of the day, what helps with all of this is supply. How can we do it better and faster? And how can we make it accessible to people who really need it, you know, that have no income or are coming out of trauma from being street homeless, all of those types of things. So that's currently what we're focusing on, trying to streamline the red tape so that we can increase supply.
Thank you so much, Betsy. Special thank you to you, Betsy, Nick, Christine, and Dr. Assemblyman Barambula. That wraps up our panel discussion, and I'll pass it over to Sergio. Thanks, you all.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Alexandra, Nick, Christine, and Betsy for a powerful presentation. Again, bringing the lived experience of folks who are dealing with the unhoused or low-income housing, the need for low-income housing in our communities in San Joaquin Valley. I am a product of a self-help community. My parents built their home in the late 60s, early 70s. And my mom still lives in that home today. So again, I know firsthand the power of home ownership from the perspective of a family who was coming out of the fields, transitioning into a new workforce, but having the ability to own their home and provide for their children and a better future for the children. So very excited, and again, continue the need for this work as we move forward. So it's 12 o'clock.